You're not becoming better, you're losing yourself, and you don't even notice. But today, you're going to see what your mind has been trying to hide from you for years. There's a silent truth almost no one has the courage to admit. The pressure to be better isn't making you stronger. It's breaking you into pieces too small to keep ignoring. It's not evolution. It's exhaustion disguised as discipline. It's that feeling that no matter what you do, you're still failing. As if there's a constant voice watching every move, every choice, every supposed mistake. And what no one told you is that this unforgiving self-criticism didn't start inside you. It was planted there through comparison, invisible expectations, and the perfectionism that seeped into your unconscious like sweet poison. You don't call it pain, but you call it, "I need to improve." Yet deep down you know, this is eating you alive. Here, in this video, you'll understand why this obsession with trying to be flawless became your biggest emotional prison. You'll see, painfully clearly, the hidden mechanism that turns effort into self-harm. You'll recognize the real root of your silent exhaustion. And most importantly, you'll learn the way back to yourself, a way that no longer requires strength, only truth. If you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why everything you labeled as failure was actually your body and your soul begging for freedom. And you'll realize that there is a way out, simpler, deeper, and more honest than any productivity promise you've ever been sold. Today, you're not just going to watch a video, you're going to see yourself in it. He felt that some forms of pressure make no noise, yet they weigh as if the whole world were resting on one person's chest. They grow in silence, fueled by the expectations of others and the self-imposed demands no one sees. The curious thing is that those who carry this burden often think it's normal, as if perfectionism were a sign of strength, when in reality it's an elegant prison. It's like trying to swim with stones in your pockets. No one notices, but every movement hurts. Its shadow appears when someone starts wondering why they never feel enough. And slowly, what started as an attempt to grow becomes exhaustion. Jung would say the heaviest burdens are the ones you take on without knowing why. He would see people trying to please the entire world and think, how does anyone survive living in constant comparison? And really, living like that is like running a marathon with no end, where the finish line moves every time you get close. It's the kind of expectation that makes a person wake up tired, feeling they owe something to everyone. Think of someone who accepts every extra task to appear competent, even when their body is already in exhaustion. That's not dedication. That's fear dressed up as effort. And fear doesn't free anyone. It traps you. Authenticity gets lost when someone lives to be the idealized version others expect. Some grow up hearing conditional compliments like, "You're amazing when you do everything right," and that creates a cruel filter, the sense that love depends on performance. It's no surprise many adults become experts at carrying invisible pressures. They learned early that mistakes cost affection. As adults, they repeat the pattern, turning into self-correction machines, always trying to be better, as if a tiny slip would ruin everything. It's like living in a house where the floor might collapse at any moment. They walk lightly, afraid of making noise no one else hears. Healing begins when they question why they accepted so much weight for so long. A simple example: he once knew a brilliant woman who reread a single email 10 times before sending it. Not because it was difficult, but because her internal comparison with people she admired made her believe she could never make a mistake. That's perfectionism masquerading as responsibility. And every time she hesitated, the shadow of expectation whispered, "You can't fail." This isn't about an email. It's about living with the constant feeling of being evaluated. It's like standing on an imaginary stage where applause and judgment are equally paralyzing. That subtle fear drains vital energy and suffocates the authenticity that could finally set her free. When someone realizes they live this way, they feel relief and fear at the same time. It's like taking off a heavy backpack after years of carrying it. The body almost resists the sudden lightness. And still, even seeing the weight, many continue out of habit because letting go of the familiar is frightening. Healing requires courage to confront the story they were taught about becoming better. And that's when real change begins. When they understand the pressure was never theirs, it was put on them. From there, a new question rises, one that leads straight into the next point, where effort starts turning into self-harm without anyone noticing. He once believed effort was synonymous with virtue, until he realized there comes a point where pushing yourself stops being strength and becomes self-aggression. It's that moment when someone keeps pushing even when they're already exhausted, like a tired horse forced to run one more lap. The pressure to improve turns into a whip, and perfectionism disguises itself as discipline. The body gives signs, but a mind trained in comparison ignores them. External expectations sink so deeply that the person no longer knows what comes from desire and what comes from self-punishment. And silently, a kind of pain is born. The pain Jung described as abandoning one's own authenticity. He knew a young man who studied until dawn every day, not because he loved learning, but because he feared being worth less if he rested. This kind of effort doesn't lead anywhere. It just digs emotional holes. The shadow of this behavior is cruel. The more someone produces, the more they feel they should produce. It's like feeding a monster that never gets full. And when someone lives like that, healing seems impossibly far away. But this isn't strength, it's fear turned into routine. Perfectionism builds a prison where the prisoner becomes their own guard. There's also the kind of person proud of handling everything, as if resilience meant tolerating what's destroying them. But that's not maturity, it's survival. He remembered a friend who worked 12-hour days, saying she was fine, while hiding panic attacks in the bathroom. This is the sort of exhaustion society applauds, blind to the damage. It's like praising a boat for moving fast without noticing it's taking on water. When authenticity is sacrificed to meet expectations, the cost always appears, and the body collects that debt with interest. The most dangerous part of this process is that effort feels noble. People truly believe they're doing the right thing. But there's a massive difference between commitment and self-abandonment. And when comparison becomes the compass, the person turns into a ghost of themselves, someone who moves, works, delivers, but feels nothing. Life becomes a sequence of tasks where rest triggers guilt. It's as if a shadow follows them around, whispering that they're always behind. And the more behind they feel, the more they try to catch up. This cycle only breaks when they realize that sometimes stopping is braver than continuing. And it's curious, when someone finally notices they're hurting themselves in the name of becoming better, an unexpected question appears. What now? The answer rarely comes immediately, but awareness already opens a path. It's like finding a secret door inside a maze that once seemed endless. The person begins examining their effort honestly, questioning whether it comes from authenticity or fear. And that clarity almost always leads to the next realization, that the ideal of perfection the mind creates is so unreachable, it was never meant to be achieved, only to keep them running. He realized early on that the human mind loves creating perfect characters, versions of ourselves who never get tired, never mess up, never bend. But chasing that ideal is like chasing the horizon. The closer you get, the further it moves. The expectation of being flawless starts small, but grows like a quiet fire consuming everything around it. And the bigger the fire, the more the person believes they must stay strong. This constant perfectionism becomes a fog that hides their authenticity. Jung said, "No mask can save us. It only exhausts us." And that deep emotional fatigue always has a name: exhaustion of the soul. He knew someone who had an endless list of goals for becoming a better person. Goals aren't the issue. The problem is when they're born from comparison instead of genuine desire. This person woke up every day believing they would only have value after achieving the next item, and there was always another. That's the mind's trick, creating a perfection so distant you never reach it. It's like trying to fill a bucket full of holes. Self-criticism is the hole. Effort is the water. And the feeling of emptiness is inevitable. This ideal wasn't meant to be reached. It was designed to keep them busy trying to fill something that was never meant to be empty. Some believe that once they become ready, they will finally start living. They say, when I fix this, when I control that, when I overcome that other thing. And without noticing, they enter a dangerous cycle where real life is endlessly postponed. The expectation of being complete is just the shadow of an old insecurity. He remembered a young woman who only wanted to post a photo once she looked perfect. The result? She never posted it, because perfection is not a goal, it's an excuse. And excuses are prisons. Real healing begins when this is seen clearly. In many cases, this search for an ideal appears in very simple ways. Rewriting a message 10 times, changing clothes over and over, redoing an entire presentation because it's not good enough. That's not attention to detail, it's fear of judgment, and fear destroys authenticity. He used to say, trying to live without mistakes is like trying to cross the ocean without getting your feet wet. People get frustrated because they demand something from themselves no human can deliver. And that frustration becomes a tight knot that suffocates slowly, quietly, but with precision. Then comes the moment when they ask, why is it never enough? This question doesn't come from failure, but from too much effort, because those who try too hard always feel like something is missing. And right there lies the truth. Maybe this endless pursuit is nothing more than a sophisticated form of escape. Escape from the fear of being seen as they are. Escape from vulnerability. Escape from their own humanity. And this realization opens the way to something deeper, the understanding that often the urge to improve is just an elegant excuse to run from truth. He noticed there's a moment when the desire for growth stops being bravery and turns into disguised avoidance. It's when someone starts trying to improve, not to live better, but to avoid facing what truly hurts. It's like cleaning the whole house to avoid sitting down for a difficult conversation. Perfectionism becomes a polished excuse, and internal pressure becomes a path leading away from authenticity. Jung said everything we avoid looking at grows in the shadow. And while someone runs after improvement, the truth quietly runs after them, more softly but more persistently. He saw this in people trying to fill an inner emptiness with courses, tasks, habits, and goals, all good things but used as emotional crutches. Each new activity looked noble, but the intention was always the same: not to stop and feel, because stopping hurts. And when it hurts, the person automatically looks for something that makes them feel productive, as if productivity were a cure for being human. This creates an invisible cycle of exhaustion. The more they run, the more tired they get. And the more tired, the more they believe they need to run. He remembered a young man who decided to become the best version of himself after being rejected in a relationship. He didn't need a better version. He needed acceptance. But afraid to face his pain, he threw himself into a routine of relentless self-demand. Gym, books, goals, productivity, everything organized to avoid feeling. But avoiding emotion is like trying to hold water in your hands. Sooner or later, it escapes. Truth is stubborn. It always finds a crack. Another example: a woman who kept saying she needed to grow spiritually before facing family conflicts. But every growth she pursued was just another layer hiding her insecurity. She collected rituals, practices, therapies, and although all had value, she used them as shields, not healing tools. Her authenticity was buried under so many attempts to be better. The pursuit of evolution had become a refined way of running from her own wounds. And ironically, what was meant to free her ended up imprisoning her. And so he recognized a pattern. The faster someone tries to evolve, the more they're running from something that hurts slowly. Avoidance shows up dressed as virtue, and they don't see it. They believe they're advancing, but they're just distancing themselves from who they are. Healing only begins when they dare to stop, not to give up, but to look. And that honest look opens the door to something larger, the understanding that the danger isn't only in running, but in the ideal that keeps them running. He saw few prisons as dangerous as the social mirror. It's that reflection that doesn't show who someone is, but who they should be to be accepted. Comparison becomes a subtle addiction fed by invisible expectations. And the more they compare, the more their authenticity dissolves. It's like living inside a glass display where everyone seems to be watching, even when no one is. Perfectionism is born there, in the desperate attempt to appear better in someone else's eyes. And this habit, so common, slowly destroys one's sense of identity. He remembered a young woman who used to say, "I'll only post when I'm perfect." She would take 100 photos, but never post any. She always found a new flaw, a shadow out of place, an invented expectation. Her self-demand was so high, she didn't need external criticism. She handled that role herself with surgical precision, and all because of silent comparison with people she didn't even know. This illusion drains emotional energy, causes exhaustion, and reinforces the belief of never being enough. And that feeling is one of the most dangerous someone can carry. He also knew a man who couldn't celebrate his achievements because he always found someone ahead. That's the poison of comparison. It steals the joy of the present and replaces it with perpetual inadequacy. It's like running a race where first place changes every second. The expectation to be the best never materializes because there's always someone else to use as reference. Jung said, "What we project onto others reveals what we fear in ourselves." And this silent fear feeds a shadow that grows with every comparison. The social mirror also shows up in seemingly innocent comments like, "You could be doing more," or "Look how far so-and-so got." These small phrases become seeds of self-demand, and when planted repeatedly, they grow like vines that choke authenticity. He understood that many people change direction not because they want to, but because they fear judgment. It's like steering a boat just to follow ships not even heading to the same destination. And the worst part, the more they follow someone else's course, the further they drift from their own. Then comes the question few dare to ask: if no one were watching, would I still choose this? This question dismantles masks, breaks expectations, and lights up places once filled with shadow. Healing begins right there, in brutal honesty with oneself. Because when someone understands how much others' eyes have shaped them, they also discover they can finally be free. And that freedom naturally leads to the next point: how a culture obsessed with productivity turned rest into guilt, creating a whole new kind of silent pressure. He noticed that productivity had become almost a modern religion. People feel guilty even for breathing slowly, as if every minute without doing something useful were a moral failure. Pressure is so strong that rest became an unspoken sin. And this illusion of being productive always creates a silent exhaustion no one dares to admit. Expectation doesn't just come from outside, it seeps inward, turning self-demand into routine. Jung said that when the shadow takes over, we confuse movement with progress. But running without direction isn't virtue, it's self-loss. He saw people with schedules so full they didn't even have the courage to feel. Every filled minute worked like emotional anesthesia. It's like turning the music up just to avoid hearing your own heartbeat. This habit looks like discipline, but it's just refined avoidance. A young woman confessed she felt guilty resting on a Sunday, as if she were betraying her own potential. Look how cruel that is. She was already exhausted, yet believed resting was weakness. This is the most dangerous fallacy of constant productivity. The lie that stopping means falling behind. There's also the type of person who transforms every area of life into an endless improvement project. Working isn't enough, they must excel. Studying isn't enough, they must master everything. Living isn't enough, they must evolve non-stop. It's as if life were a spreadsheet in constant update, but the body isn't a machine, and when treated like one, it charges a high price. A young man said he developed nightly insomnia because he couldn't shut off, even to sleep. That's not ambition, that's self-violence. Perfectionism disguises itself as productivity, and people don't even notice they're losing authenticity. Ironically, this constant drive to do more doesn't lead to accomplishing more. It leads to feeling less. The person becomes so focused on never stopping that they disconnect from their own presence. It's like driving an entire highway without noticing the scenery. He always said that productivity without awareness is just noise. Comparison also plays a role. When someone sees others rushing, they feel they must keep up, and like that, an entire culture becomes prisoner to collective expectation. Healing begins the moment someone questions this rhythm, like taking off shoes after a walk that was far too long. And then comes an uncomfortable suspicion. Am I busy, or am I running from something? This question makes a person pause for a second, and this second is priceless. Because in that moment, they realize their worth might not be where they've been searching. The pressure to be tireless starts to lose control, and a new kind of awareness is born, one that recognizes rest as part of life, not failure. And this awareness opens space for the next point, where inner wisdom, the one Jung spoke so often about, reveals that the shadow isn't an enemy, but an invitation to authenticity. He always believed that inside each person lives a silent leader, an inner voice that knows exactly who they are long before the world tries to shape them. Jung said that what we refuse to see in ourselves becomes shadow, and it's precisely that shadow that carries deep clues about our authenticity. But many people live so trapped in the pressure to appear strong that they ignore this inner call. It's like trying to navigate without a compass. You may be moving, but you don't know where you're headed. And without noticing, self-demand becomes the captain of the ship. He observed people who believed they were in control simply because they maintained a rigid routine, impeccable, almost mechanical. But a rigid routine isn't inner leadership. It's fear of failure disguised as discipline. True leadership appears when someone has the courage to look at the shadow and ask, "What are you trying to show me?" A simple example, a woman irritated by slow people. When she explored that irritation, she realized it came from internal comparison born from unrealistic expectations of herself. The shadow wasn't a defect, it was a cry for healing. He would often say, ignoring the shadow is like locking a wild animal in a dark room. The more you try to hide it, the louder it becomes. The exhaustion many people feel comes from this inner war, where perfectionism is constantly battling authenticity. A young man told him he was always trying to be the strong one in the family, yet inside he felt afraid and fragile. This mismatch only increased the pressure. When he finally admitted that to himself, he felt unexpected relief, as if he'd taken off a backpack full of stones. Inner wisdom is simple, but not easy. It asks for sincerity. It asks someone to acknowledge the parts of themselves they're ashamed to show, the very parts that make them human. And the more they try to hide those parts, the more they drift from authenticity. Jung said the meeting with the shadow marks the beginning of the journey toward becoming whole. And wholeness has nothing to do with perfection. It has to do with presence. He remembered a friend who realized her greatest fear was rejection, and once she accepted that, she finally stopped comparing herself to others. And it's at this point that someone begins to understand that their real strength never came from the perfect image they tried to hold up, but from the honesty of facing their own light and darkness. This realization is transformative. It's like turning on a flashlight in a room they were always afraid to enter. From then on, they understand that their inner leader doesn't shout, it whispers. And listening to that whisper opens a subtle door leading straight to the next point, when the body starts yelling everything the mind refuses to say. He always said the body is the most honest messenger there is. When the mind tries to hide, justify, or push feelings into the shadow, the body takes over and begins to shout. Sometimes through insomnia, sometimes tension in the shoulders, sometimes exhaustion without any clear reason. It's not weakness. It's communication. Pressure, when ignored, turns into symptoms, and ironically, the person most desperate to appear strong is often the one carrying the loudest signs of fragility. Jung said, "What doesn't reach consciousness returns as fate. In the body, it returns as pain." He remembered a woman who lived with constant headaches. She went through doctors, tests, treatments. Everything came back normal. But the moment she admitted she lived under intense perfectionism and self-demand, the headaches began to soften. Her body wasn't sick, it was tired. Tired of holding up impossible expectations. Tired of pretending fear didn't exist. When she embraced her own humanity, something inside her finally relaxed. The body thanks you when authenticity is allowed to breathe. A young man confessed to waking up exhausted every day, even after 8 hours of sleep. He lived in constant comparison with colleagues who produced more, and his mind was always on high alert trying to keep up. It was like he was running a mental marathon every night, and his body, deprived of real rest, paid the price. His exhaustion wasn't physical, it was emotional weight. The expectation of being flawless drained his vitality. He only began to improve when he realized rest wasn't stupidity, it was healing. The body also speaks through anxiety, that strange tightness in the chest or shortness of breath. He used to say, anxiety is the soul feeling squeezed inside a life too small. When someone forces themselves into patterns that don't match their authenticity, the body reacts. It's like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. You can force it for a while, but the pain always shows up. Repressed emotional pain always looks for an escape, and when it can't come out through the mind, it finds its way through the body. And then, when someone finally understands their symptoms are messages, something deep shifts. They stop hating themselves for being tired. They stop blaming themselves for not being strong all the time. And they start seeing their body as an ally, not an enemy. Healing begins when they ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" That question opens an important door, one that leads directly to the next point, where they learn that growing isn't about adding layers, but returning to the essential self that's always been there. He always believed true evolution isn't about adding more to life, but removing the excess, burying who we really are. Returning to the essential is like reconnecting with authenticity, that forgotten version of ourselves that existed before pressure, before perfectionism, before endless comparison. It's like cleaning a room that's been piling up boxes of others' expectations for years. Slowly, the person begins to realize that what exhausted them wasn't life itself, but the weight of trying to be something they never needed to be, and that creates space for real healing. He saw people trying so hard to improve that they forgot the basics: breathe, feel, exist. A woman told him that after years of trying to be perfect at work, she realized her deepest joy came from simple things: cooking for her kids, walking in the late afternoon, feeling the sun on her face. The essential had been there all along, but the shadow of self-demand made her believe simplicity meant failure. Jung said humans don't need to collect achievements. They need to integrate themselves. She only understood that when she dared to slow down. He remembered a man who lived in constant exhaustion, trying to prove his worth to his family. He worked, saved, studied, collected degrees, but never felt whole. Until one day, sitting alone, he realized his soul missed the person he used to be before all that. Returning to the essential requires bravery to step back, to let go of what was never yours. It's like emptying a backpack after years of carrying stones that never belonged to you. The comparison that once guided him lost its power when he began listening to his own need for peace. He would say the essential is like the heart of a tree, invisible, but the source of its strength. When someone lives under expectation and perfectionism, it's like putting on artificial leaves to look prettier, but artificial leaves don't breathe. They don't sustain life. The essential is what remains when all the masks fall, and surprisingly, it's lighter than anyone expects. Authenticity grows when the excess dissolves, and life begins to gain a meaning that doesn't depend on applause. Then comes a nearly poetic realization. Sometimes being better means being less burdened, less pressured, less conditioned. The person realizes true strength lives in the simplicity of existing honestly, and when they reconnect with that center, they see they no longer need to chase validation. This discovery naturally opens space for one final understanding, that their humanity, with all its mistakes, flaws, fears, and imperfections, was never an obstacle, but the path to freedom. He always said a person's humanity, their fears, their flaws, their doubts, isn't a defect, it's direction. But many carry the expectation that they must be strong all the time. This pressure creates the illusion that fragility gets in the way, when in fact it reveals paths the logical mind can't see. Perfectionism convinces us we'll only be worthy when we're ready, but no one is ever completely ready. We are works in progress, and that's exactly what makes us real. Authenticity begins when we stop fighting our own nature. He remembered a man who blamed himself for crying during a difficult moment. He thought he was failing for not being able to hold it together. But when he finally allowed the emotion to flow, he realized crying didn't weaken him. It freed him. The shadow he'd been hiding was simply the plea of someone carrying years of exhaustion. Healing only began when he stopped comparing himself to the rigid idea of masculinity he'd been taught. Jung said denying the soul makes a person live half a life. He understood that late, but in time. The truth is that trying to be perfect only creates distance between who we are and who we pretend to be. And living in that gap hurts. Comparison fuels insecurity, self-demand becomes routine, and suddenly the person feels they no longer know themselves. He saw this often, people confusing vulnerability with weakness and authenticity with exposure. But vulnerability is a bridge, not a hole. It's what allows life to reach us. The pressure to appear flawless creates a shell. But shells don't hug, don't connect, don't heal. Healing starts with truth, no matter how small it is. He noticed people trying to fit into models of success that were never meant for them. And every time they squeezed themselves into those molds, something inside broke quietly. Authenticity drifted farther, while the shadow grew, fed by fear of judgment. But paradoxically, when someone accepts being imperfect, they become truly strong. It's like a vase repaired with gold, using the Japanese art of kintsugi. The cracks don't diminish its worth. They reveal its story. And this deep understanding led him to the same conclusion every time. A person's humanity, with all it carries, is the doorway to a lighter, more conscious life. It isn't the obstacle, it's the path. When someone accepts that, something inside finally breathes. The weight of expectation softens, comparison loses power, and authenticity has room to bloom. And this opens the door to the very journey guiding the whole video, understanding that the pressure to be better was never about evolution, but about liberation. In the end, the truth is simple. You weren't born to live crushed by the pressure of being perfect. You were born to exist, with the pauses, the curves, the mistakes, the fears, the reboots. And now that you've seen more clearly the silent mechanism that turned your desire to grow into a prison, what are you going to do with that? Will you keep trying to satisfy an impossible ideal? Will you keep comparing yourself with lives that aren't yours? Or will you finally allow your authenticity to breathe? Ask yourself, what part of me has been begging for rest for months? What am I chasing out of fear and not truth? These answers matter. They can change your destiny. And once you have the courage to face them honestly, healing begins on its own. If this video touched a part of you that you don't usually show, write in the comments, what pressure are you willing to let go of today? Your words might set someone else free too. And if you want to keep exploring these deep truths, if you want to go further on your self-awareness journey with clarity, courage, and consciousness, then subscribe to Mind's Silent Echo. Turn on notifications. Here every week you'll find reflections that don't just inform, they transform.